Welcome back. We're so looking forward to besides beginning a brand new epistle, a brand new Igeres, but within the Igeres HaKedesh, in this segment of Igeres HaKedesh, we mentioned so many times how the Tanya is comprised of 5 segments. We've mentioned there's an idea behind it. This is the Torah Shebiksav of Teres Achsidus, those 5 parts, 5 segments. The fourth is the present segment that we're learning, or the fourth is the segment that we're presently learning. That is Igeres HaKedesh, the holy letters, the holy epistles of the Alter Rebbe. We did mention we had a presentation in the beginning of the 10th Igeres HaKedesh Esen. We had a presentation in the beginning of the 10th letter. Within this segment, the backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh, quite a few details, which is pretty much telling, and it definitely gives a broad understanding of the Alter Rebbe's objective and goals in these letters. Not all of them, of course, are the same, but yet there is a common thread between, I would say, most of these letters, or a significant majority. Again, you can see it, it's not fair to repeat it all because we took the time in the beginning of that Igeres. Now, to get to that Igeres, it's very simple, particularly if you're following us on the wherever you're following, but namely on the original website, Tanya Online, one word, .com. And really a click away. All the previous classes are set up on the left side. As we mentioned quite a few times, we merited to conclude Likutei Amorim, to learn and conclude Likutei Amorim, Shari Yichud B'Emunah, which is the second Igeres HaTshuva, and we're holding middle Igeres HaKodesh. We concluded last week the 12th Igeres, the 12th letter. Quite a few classes on it, and a very informative, like every Perek really, in Tanya, every Perek in Shari Yichud B'Emunah, Igeres HaTshuva, every Igeres of these Igeres HaKodesh are loaded with information and revolutionary approach with all these matters that the Alter Rebbe deals with. And B'chlal, the Alter Rebbe, every area which the Alter Rebbe put his quill to the parchment, if you will, is something which was, something which was unique and revolutionary indeed. The Alter Rebbe was in a Neshama Chadasha, as we explained, we mentioned quite a few times, which was a game changer to this whole approach, a personal appreciation to our Torah, sharing it with others. Kin milachmoi nosan ladal, his own bread. Like it said, Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave over to even the dal. Dal is a terminology which is used, the impoverished, the poor, and it's, for that matter, even between oni and dal, between the two terms of identifying the poor. One is oni, famously oni ve'evian. Dal is even less than that. And milachmei nosan ladal, he shared with us. Even when we say us, it doesn't necessarily mean the grand, the great, or even anything between, but even Ladal, everybody can pick up the Tanya, any work of the Alter Rebbe, and of course in Nigla the Torah, not to mention the L'Sheni Hazav, enormous B'chlal, Alter Rebbe's knowledge. It was a learned Shulchan Aruch, particularly the Kuntras Achron of the Alter Rebbe. In Nigla the Torah, it is a revolutionary understanding, appreciation, and presentation. L'Sheni Hazav would mean the golden expressions of the Alter Rebbe. So every halacha you learn, it just flows in such a unique way. There's talent there. Besides the fact, the greatness of the Alter Rebbe, the organized mind, every halacha you learn, it's so distinctly presented. And again, famously mentioned by those who study the Alter Rebbe's Torah, but in Pnimis HaTorah, it is every word, Likutei Torah, but of course starting from Igeres HaKodesh, starting from Tanya Kadisha, the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe. But on top of that, Yud Gimel, this chapter that we're starting over here, is definitely unique among the unique chapters of the Igeres HaKodesh, among the unique letters of the Alter Rebbe, the unique epistles. it's so interesting. We'll mention it towards the end how, for whatever reason, there's different versions of this Pedic. Namely, towards the end, what's the end of the Pedic? The way we have it in our print, it's like the Alter Rebbe is not even demanding anything, which is very distinct in comparison to all the different chapters. Alter Rebbe places the presentation and he demands if it's Torah, Tefillah, namely tzedakah, which is again a common thread between all these Igeres. We mentioned this in the beginning of 10 as well, based on the Alter Rebbe's campaign associated with Reb Mendel Haradoker's Aliyah with his Talmidim. Again, just take a look at the beginning of 10. I would want to go back there for a moment, take a look when I say, because all the previous classes are lined up on the left side of the site. There's an advantage to the site, additional, which we do mention as well, it's easy to follow. The text is on a separate scroll bar, and as such easy to follow. The classes, all of them, they all come up pretty much in the same way, but also the ability to take a look at any of the previous classes, and many times we do cross-reference. Alter Rebbe himself cross-references in these chapters, like it's explained elsewhere. We try to, sometimes Alter Rebbe says what chapter it is, or he writes Memakim Acher, and if it's in Tanya Kadisha, we try to tell you where it is, and it's easy. It's literally a click away. They could easily find those classes. Or find that subject which the Alter Rebbe is presently talking about, and the other place in elaboration. So it's, of course, like it says, the Gemara says, meaning sometimes it says the matter very succinctly in one place, and then in the another it's with elaboration. And that's what Torah says, have the vast knowledge of Torah, you'll understand everything you're learning with expansiveness, with elaboration, because you'll find it somewhere else. And in this case as well, that many times Alter Rebbe references other places, many times we do when we're learning an idea, and look there, and it's really a click away. It's seconds throughout in all four segments of Likutei Amarim, it's really, really easy to follow, to find rather, based on the way this site is built, the original site, TanyaOnline.com. So back to the Igeres HaKodesh, most of the times the Alter Rebbe ends up with a profound explanation of an idea, and then he comes up with the lesson which we learn, or what we're supposed to glean from this in the context of tzedakah, for example. And for that matter, these other versions which have an ending to this chapter have the same type of conclusion, and therefore extend yourself in the midst of tzedakah, for that matter, which is also the spirit of this chapter, and to give tzedakah based on this the explanation of this, the spirit of the explanation, elucidation of the Alter Rebbe in this topic that he's explaining, and the demand based, of course, the Alter Rebbe had this unique presentation to bring us into the pnimius, to the inwardness of these psukim and the spirit of the Maimer Chazal, to get our neshama, to the inner workings of our neshama, which is in essence has a certain blikvul, infinite energy, which that's a neshama, it's a part of Hashem. It's a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so therefore, bring us into that area so we could execute our Avodas Hashem in general in a total different qualitative manner, because we're coming from the pnimis of our neshama, which is revealed to us from the pnimis of Torah, tapping into the sussing the kuchabrichu, the inner dimensions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like it says in every area, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Torah and Yisrael, there's the susim and the galia. Alter Rebbe brings us into it. So it's not another vart, another idea. So Yidul learns Chassidus is not he gained a certain knowledge of vartel about a certain vart, a certain way of appreciating a certain pasuk in Torah, with again another way of looking at it, or a deeper vart, a deeper idea, a deeper insight into that pasuk. It's totally different. Alter Rebbe wasn't just here to say certain vertlach. Vertlach means different insights in explaining certain and maybe exciting, like the Hasidic works and Hasidic teachings. They always have some certain excitement to them, but Alter Rebbe's, which that itself, of course, arouses the person to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yes, with more passion and more excitement. But Alter Rebbe was by far a total different idea. He really pulled us in to the pnimis of our neshama, of our own soul, pnimis of Teira, pnimis the Kut, pnimis the Sasim the Kuchibrichu, which it's not just a little more of a passion, excitement, and dance and so on, like a total different expression of the way we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't compare someone serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the Galia Shebinishmasei, the revealed, more apparent part of his neshama, or the most surface part of his neshama. And so to Taita, and so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to someone who is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the very inwardness of his neshama, his or her neshama, with the inward spirit of Taita, connecting to the sussing, to the inwardness, if you will, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a different type of Avodas Hashem, so one must see this, and one should, because we have this gift that we're able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a total different level. So we should do this constantly. It's a different phenomenon of Avodas Hashem. The Alter Rebbe was a unique idea. That's why the Alter Rebbe's Torah, Chassidus Chabad, is like the introduction to eventual Umola Ha'aretz De'as Hashem, like the Rambam writes, Le'yesa Kol Olam Kulil Dasas Hashem Levad. Mashiach comes, we're not just going to be a little different, maybe with a little bit of a Mashiach tinsel, if you will. No, it's going to be a different idea, a different human being. Like the Alter Rebbe, the Rambam writes, like Abba the Navi, he says, become like a total different person, a different phenomenon, not an angel nor an angel with wings, but it's a different inward approach to our connection and our commitment to Torah mitzvahs, our intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes through Das, Malaretz Deas Hashem, Vadam Yodas Chava, meaning to say it will be something totally different. We as human beings, our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be totally different. And that's the point of Yedias Hashem, living a life based on knowing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, you can see the lashon of the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, right? The Rambam's Mishnah Torah, the magnum opus of the Rambam, which is the Yad HaChazaka, the 14 Sfarim of the Rambam, known as the Rambam, the last halacha in the last segment, the last few halachas, in the last two halachas. The Rambam opens up like what's going to be, Mashiach will come, and this, just like Matan Torah began with like 300-400 years of preparation from Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, so too the Baal Shem Tov came down to this world and opened up the light of the Shivas Hayamim, the Eir Shivas Hayam, like it's explained. But as the Rebbe Rashab says, who Teres of Baal Shem Tov, he Teres of Baal Shem Tov, which is the Alter Rebbe, not negating the other Rabbein, Talmidei Baal Shem, of course, each one were fire, Kigach Liyesh, but that idea of metamorphosing the human being to look at things totally different, connect with Hashem in a total different way, was of course the Alter Rebbe through his Chassidus Chabad. Not to go into it, we spoke about it other times. So Alter Rebbe explains an idea and right away channels it into, therefore the Avodah, the tzedakah, it's not just like a tzedakah, it's a different type of tzedakah, different type of limudat Torah, different type of prayer, because you're coming from a very deep place within your own neshama, which Alter Rebbe made you aware of that domain, brought you into that domain. In this chapter, again, there's the other versions which have that conclusion. In the common printed chapter version, it doesn't even say anything like that. It ends up with one of the greatest expressions of brachas, blessings, to the individual, to Am Yisrael. Like even with the whole Tanya, which a lot of we get us, Bechlal, the Tanya, there's so much blessing in every word of the Tanya, but there's some of the Alter Rebbe blesses, and Alter Rebbe, even the previous chapter, the idea of Shalom, Hashem opening up a window to the Ein Sof, which of course manifests with great blessings in the person's life, even though the Alter Rebbe takes the Shalom to another step, that transparency, that ability to see things clearly, which is also one of the greatest brachas. Again, we spoke about this in the previous chapter, but nothing compared to the enormous blessings the Alter Rebbe unleashes over here, if you will, in this very chapter Yud Gimel, the way he concludes. Oh, look at just the words. Ato Hashem tisnai gimom b'midas lecha godel b'li gvul v'tachlis, and ikarav chesed, and we'll understand, we'll explain this, and that's where the Perek ends. So there's a lot of blessed energy in this chapter, especially we're coming into this blessed month and so on. So it's exciting. It's exciting. It's a very exciting chapter. I would even add those words. It's an exciting chapter indeed. So let's start over here. Morav Tuvcha Shetzofanti L'Recha. David HaMelech says, "How great is your kindness that you hid for those who fear you. Literally, literal translation. Okay, it has its, we can appreciate its meaning on its simple level. Hashem has kindness. How great is your kindness that you hid to those who fear you. So you would say that you imparted your kindness to those who fear you. But why hid the kindness of those who fear you? You gave it to them. You extended it to them. Those who are Yarei Hashem, those who fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yirei Yacha, so they have that Tov, your goodness, but not only your goodness, your Rav Tovcha, your abundance of goodness that you shared with them, you gave them, you imparted, and you extended it to them, you handed over to them. Why Tzafanto? Why did you hide it, Lirei Yacha? What's that expression of Tzafanto? We have to understand, of course. And just on a simple meaning, the whole idea that you want that Rav Tucha should be manifest. And if it's a quality of Rav Tucha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so of course you want it to be manifest. You want it to be expressive. Because if it's hiding, what do you gain? Like someone's gifted $1 billion, $1 million, whatever. And yeah, it's somewhere a hiding place in your home. Maybe don't try to look for it because it's going to remain Safanta. What does the person gain? His lifestyle doesn't change a bit. If he's struggling, the person will continue to struggle because he doesn't know where that is. So if you're extending yourself to extending this goodness or extending this gift of wealth to somebody, of course you're going to make it apparent that your person could be able to identify it and use it in good health and good spirit, to be able to make that change in his or her life. So if Hashem is extending the Tov and the Rav Tovcha, his grand kindness to those who fear him, which makes sense. Why? That's the people. Those are the people who deserve the Rav Tov of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One would, easily say, but why Tzafanto? Why did you hide it among the people you fear? So Alter Rebbe goes on. When you're talking about those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yesh beis b'chinas u'madreges chalukos mitzat sheirish nishmasam l'maylo. That when you're talking about people who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which this is the reason why Neshama came down to this world to serve Hashem, Baruch the reason why we came down to this world is to serve our Creator. So a Yid is an Oved Hashem. A Yid is meant to be the Oved Hashem. We're here to serve our Creator. So when it comes to serving some Hashem, Avdei Hashem, it's a Lashon HaPasuk, right? You find in Lashon of the quite a few psukim actually start Moshe Rabbeinu, Avdi Moshe. Moshe was, of course, an archetype Eved Hashem. This is what we find in over Tilim. We find the terminology Avdei Hashem, because this is what the Yid is meant to be. We're here to serve our Creator. So when it comes to Avdei Hashem, speak with those who are serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says there's two levels. Now, we arguably can say there's many different ways, not different ways the Yid serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, it's all based on his learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and gimel. So there's no other way. Of course, there's no other way. But in the way they express that very learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and davening and giving tzedakah, based on character, based on many, many details of the makeup of the human being, we have a shadish. There's the Alter Rebbe has in Likutei Torah an expression, beginning of Bahaloischa Saneres. He says that there's an Evdei Hashem. There's 7 levels in Evdei Hashem, corresponding to the 7 midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Chesed for those who have more passion, their passion, and more loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's more Yidin who have more Yirei Hashem. Every Yirei Hashem, of course, has love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but namely, there is the one who excels in Avas Hashem, loving Hashem. There's the one who excels in Yiras Hashem, revering God. And then the Tiferes and the Netzach. He wants that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's vision, goal should be implemented to the T with Netzach and with certain determination. I mean, again, the Alter Rebbe goes through a few. In other places, he goes through in a little more detail, actually, in Perik, in Geras HaKodesh Tezvav, just 2 ahead. Alter Rebbe has also the different expressions of the Yid's service service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way it's expressed in these very 10 ways, and then he breaks it down into the 7 expressions based on the 7 spheres of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, Chesed, Gvura, Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 7 attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisei, Malchus. But the Alter Rebbe says that there clearly there's 7 different type of Evdei Hashem. But here the Alter Rebbe says there's 2, because again, it's not a contradiction. It's a little more a generic, a more general statement, meaning say a general division, that is. So there's 2 levels, chalukas, which are distinct, two bchinas madregas, 2 different levels, and mitzad sheirish nishmasam lamayla. It doesn't come of where they came from, what type of upbringing they had, what they accustomed themselves to. It goes much deeper than that. It comes from their source of their soul on high, which there's certain souls, neshamas, which are coming more from the yamin, and the other ones coming from smail. Yamin would be the right, and the smail would be the left, which we're going to explain in a moment. Now, what does that mean, neshamas coming from different levels? Didn't we say neshamas a chelik l'kami mal mamash? There's part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, there's one God, so there's one type of neshama. So, the Alter Rebbe really enters into that arena, if you will, in the 2nd chapter. It's worth to see, 2nd chapter of Likutei Amorim, the 1st segment. How do we find differences in neshamas? You can't compare the neshama of Avraham Avinu to the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu to the neshama of the people, even in their generations, and much more so in the subsequent generations, and much more so in comparison to the generations we find ourselves now. But if there's one God, the neshama is a part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so why are there differences? And by extension, we could ask this question over here. Not only when we compare Avraham Avinu, or Yaakov Avinu, Yitzchak to Moshe to other neshamas, how could there be a difference? Because Alter Rebbe explains it there so eloquently, so beautifully. But even when you're talking about neshamas in the same generation, he also doesn't negate. He doesn't say dafka different generations. Even in every generation, of course, you have neshamas greater than neshamas, the leaders of the generation, as an example, and those who are not the leaders. The Amcha, even Talmid Chacham, but nonetheless, there is within even every generation the great neshamas, great souls, and he reconciles how is that possible. But here it's the Aminu Smile, and the question is also, what does it mean in neshama, which is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's coming from the right side, from the left side. It's one God, Hashem Echad. And the answer is, like we just said, in the Adam Ha'elyon, in the primordial Adam, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, Kaviyachal, it's beyond Adam, but this is called Adam Ha'elyon. It says the Adam is called, the Medrash says, Al Shem Adam El Ha'elyon. We are compared to the On High. So the On High, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, also has the 10 spheres, and we even said it then in Perek Gimel. Perek Gimel begins as a follow-up of the 2nd chapter, Likutei Amorim, the 1st segment. Then as a follow-up of the 2nd chapter there, and Alter Rebbe says every year there's a chelik l'kami mal mamash. That's the way the chapter begins. Of Nefesh Hasheni is B'Yisrael. It's a chelik. It's really a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So one would think, oh, it's this great light, Ein Sof, and it's this great light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem has this. Hashem is Ein Sof, and Hashem has this beyond the norm type of brightness, of course, spiritual brightness, because it's a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Comes down to them and says, just like on high, namely the world of Atzilus. Again, you can see there the when we talk about the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, primarily we're talking about, or namely we're talking about Elam HaAtzilus, which represents and houses the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke about this many times, the difference of Atzilus and the other worlds, which are also divided into 10, and also very sublime spiritual worlds. But when we talk about the Adam Ha'elyon, the primordial Adam, of course, just Kaviyachal, of course, you just as based on this, Medrash says Adam Ha'elyon, you're talking about Atzilus, which in Atzilus is the purity of the Ein Sof is housed in Atzilus. Atzilus is etzlei v'samuchlei le'yigur chara. There's nothing of evil in the most subtle type of yeshus. Doesn't exist in Atzilus. That's why it represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu in these Atzilus, there's 10 spheres in Atzilus. There's Chacham Bin Adas. That's where Alter Rebbe begins in Perek Gimel. This very neshama. Yes, of course, it's an Eri Gadlin. Of course, within levels of the neshama, you have much deeper than the Midas expression of the neshama, or even the Chacham Bin Adas expression of the neshama. We learned about this as well in other times. There's the Chaya of the Neshama, Yechida of the Neshama, which is the Mesidus Nefesh, so to say, mode chip within the Neshama. We learned this in the 18th, 19th chapter, if you recall, of L'Kuti Amorim, or you click away. Other times, Alter Rebbe speaks about this idea as well. Yechida Shebenefesh. Of course, it's an Eir God, let's say, infinite light. Because it comes from an infinite God. But nonetheless, there's the lower levels of the neshama, which is the 10 spheres, but it's part of the neshama itself. Comes out to the Peri Gimel, says it's very neshama, just like on high. Hashem has 10 sphirot, so too the neshama has 10 spheres, 10 ways of expressing its connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he goes on in that very third chapter. He goes on the Chochmah, the Bina, the Das, the Chesed, the Gvura, and then he goes on, doesn't articulate the other 5 spheres, because he says they are really branches of Abba and Yira, branches of Chesed and Gvura. Even though in other places, like in Perek Tezvav, we have not learned it yet, but you see it whenever you click away where on other sites, which Alter Rebbe divides these 10 spheres with greater detail and articulation, and the way Yid serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So on the overall, just why are there 5? Even going back to that chapter. So if it exists in Hashem, so it exists within us. Why are the 5 just branches? Because there Alter Rebbe writes it clearly. The name, the chief midas of every of these 7 midas are, of course, the Chesed and the Gvura, the first 2, which are extreme: Chesed, kindness, Gvura, discipline, and the other midas are expressions of that very Chesed and that very Gvura. Explained in other places of Chassidus also, even though they have their distinct style and expression, but nonetheless they're branches. Categorically, they're branches of Chesed and Gvura. So the Chesed and Gvura are the chief midas of the essence of the 7 midas. So we talk about the neshamas, which come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, come from Atzilus, come from the highest levels of Atzilus, come from Chochmah Atzilus, deeper and yet deeper within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But nonetheless, there is that structure within the neshamas which have the 10 spheres. So when we talk about the source of the neshama, there's everyone has everyone has all the spheres to which he or she expresses their connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yet, certain neshamas, the Yamin is more dominant, the Chesed is more dominant, and other neshamas, the Gvura is more dominant. And this is what he says: Sheiresh nishmasam mebchinas yaminu smail. The classic example, which Alter Rebbe actually brings over here in this chapter, it says Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, or Shammai and Hillel himself. Even though it's interesting, we find about 300 times Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue in Shas. What about Shammai and Hillel itself? One would say maybe they argued 240 times, and their students repeated those arguments, and they expanded more, another 60, 70 arguments so just to understand why were they arguing so much. But Shammai and Hillel, ironically, the Gemara says, Shabbos famously, that they only argued in 3 places. Shammai and Hillel argued only in 3 places. The 300, which is 100 times more, was the Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, the house of Shammai. The house of Hillel means their yeshiva. Not only their yeshiva in their immediate generation, but even later. It says even about Rabbi Akiva, if we know that it was inclined to the Shammai thinking. But the idea is that there was 2 schools of thought. But why was there 2 schools of thought? Among Yidden, why would there be 2 schools, especially such great giants? Tanoim were like fire. Famous Mishnah, the famous famous presentation of it's brought also part of it in Medrash, but it says it in the Talmud that the students of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, there's an expression, Zuta b'chu mechayim mesim, the lowest of one of them was able to resurrect the dead, to the kayach they had, how close they were to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Atana was a fire. So, and again, spoken about this so many times, actually, that very presentation about the Minazil, and then which was the greatest Talmud, and the famous story with the bird. The bird flew overhead. I mean, we're not going to go into that. They just a few anecdotes. the very few anecdotes. They were able to, even the Gemara says, Pinchas ben Yair, he had to cross a river. He said, Inar, Chaleklach. I mean, like Kriyas Yamsuf, which we celebrate through the millennia, and start even Teiras Yashir by the Tanaim, was something so simple. They were gigantic. They were godly powerhouses, each one of them. So why were they arguing? Just a different opinion, but why is it established two school of thoughts based on two greatest of giants of all time, Shammai and Hillel himself? So it says because Hillel, they both had neshamis, both souls, not only souls, their souls was a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Unless Hillel was more connected, the stream, so to say, the energy was overwhelmingly chesed from his chesed of his neshama. So Hillel also has the 10 sfiras, but what was overwhelming, by far, if you will, over the Gvura was the chesed, the kindness. By Shammai was the opposite. His source of his neshama was more anchored in the spirit of Gvura. Again, all 10 sfiras, but namely underscored, or rather the energy of Gvura in Beis Shammai's soul was overwhelming, even more than the other spheres within his own neshama. And because it was Gvuras, he was much more strict and stringent. I mean to say, no, I cannot see that item, let's say, being sublimated and being part of the godly reality, therefore I must cancel it and say, no, you should not eat it, or you should not do it, you should not perform with it, and so on, like the general arguments of Beis Shammai and Hillel. It's prohibited. Beis Hillel said no, because of their connection to chesed, which chesed is about kindness, extension, and therefore, there's room that this could be mutar, which means it could be unleashed and taken away, this which blocks its connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yes, you perhaps can eat it, elevate it, sublimate it to a higher level. That's the point of chesed, it's inclusion, because it's about kindness, like the difference of someone who's a kind person or more of a disciplinarian. This is more the no and this is more the yes. And again, it's explained in so many places. I'm saying this with maximum brevity over here. And therefore, there was the difference in their opinions, in their approach. And therefore, the schools of Shammai and Hillel had such a different look and such a different approach, because Shammai and Hillel, and by extension their schools, one was more connection to the chesed, and therefore room for leniency, for inclusion, while Beis Shammai was about gvura, a little more a disciplinarian type of approach, and therefore, no, it's not so easy that this should be part of the godly equation. Again, which was thus the reason they prohibited, and there was the chayav, the puzzle or the asur prohibited. There was the removal, not so fast. Not necessarily this could be included into the master plan or the godly area, the godly domain. So this is a classic case of the two schools, which you see evidently that it's beyond their just argument, why people argue. And besides the fact, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. The whole point of Torah is lasses shalom ba'olam, the Gemara says. Hashem meis lamiitein, Hashem yivarech esami v'shalom. It says Kol HaTorah Kula, right? The end of certain Masechtas and Shas. Hashem, the whole Torah was given in order to bring peace, and those who represent the Torah should have been by far an example for increasing peace and peaceful acts and peaceful conduct, and certainly learning Torah peacefully. And the answer is, first of all, we should know, of course, when they argued, it was nothing more than a Torah type of argument. As the Gemara says, is Vahiv B'Sufa, in the end, they were really lovingly connected, even post a particular argument. After the very argument, the argument was based on their understanding and appreciation of Torah, which was based on the source of their soul. But in the end, between there was true and complete unity, and perhaps or probably more unity because of their Torah learning. And they engaged in so many different ways. Engaged also, it says that they never had an issue even to actually marry the families of Shammai, intermarried, if you will, to borrow that term. Precisely because of their deep connection to Torah, which is about bringing peace. They lived truly, peacefully, and like a united family. And because of the Torah, but in the areas of Torah, which each one was trying to bring out the truth of Torah based on the source of their soul, of course, there was by far diametrically opposite opinions based on the source of their soul, their emes. So this is given as a classic example. But the Alter Rebbe brings these two ideas of Yamin and Shmol in Avodas Hashem and the Avodah of Yidden in general, which is, he starts with Shmol. He starts with the left, which is Midas HaTzimtzum V'Hester B'Avodas Hashem. The idea of condensement, contraction, and discreteness, cover up in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like what does it say? And it's a virtuous. It's not, when you say smile, you say the left and this is the right. No, it's extremely virtuous in the Avodas Hashem, like it says, "V'hatzni lechas im Hashem," like do things discreetly. In other words, it's their Avodas Hashem is not loud. It's not, you say the chesed is extension. Extension is makes more of a statement, and someone is the extrovert and the introvert. Of course, that's in personality. But the giver of tzedakah, of course, makes more of a tumult because there's so many people which are benefiting from this giver. And then there is those who don't give so much. So of course it's quieter because less people are benefiting. But there's those people who give, but they give b'seiser, which is a great quality. Giving discreetly tzedakah without the fanfare is enormous quality. But the idea is that in the end of the day, the excitement and the passion of Torah and tzedakah somewhat remains, under the radar, and one has to be very careful. There's different times, different generations, which not necessarily everything works or everything is a virtue and an advantage. Especially, for example, a generation like today, when there's so much other areas which are causing and different types of fanfare spirit, if you will. And beyond that, so of course, today it's not necessarily a person who learns Torah, you should go to a shul, you should go to a beis medrash, and you should make it obvious that my passion is learning Torah, that my next door neighbor or my next door neighbor in shul or in society and community should be able to pick up that my passion is in learning Torah. My passion is davening, to come to a minyan and to give tzedakah. Yes, people should know that if Hashem gives you excess amount of money, He's making you the ambassador of tzedakah. You have the merit to be the one who Hashem chose you to give, to extend yourself to those who are in need. And today, maybe not to give so much b'seiser, more so, there's enough b'seiser one can do discreetly over this which he does with an overt expression or a demonstrable expression of it in his Avodah Hashem. And today, for example, the idea of Seiser it's a good thing. Again, there's nothing like serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara says, famous Gemara says, those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Seiser, their connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in a total different level, which means discreetly, but not everything has to be, I don't want anybody to know, nor am I my tzedakah, nor am I my prayer, nor am I my learning Torah. I'll sit in my corner all night. What do people understand? Especially in a generation where there's so much out there, and it's so easily to become passionate about so many other things, and things which are not only just, we call it parv, not godly, but something in the straight center. But unfortunately, we're in a generation which the opposite of kedusha is so much out there, and causing such tumult and such identity, demanding identification with. And beyond identification, a passion too. So today's a day, for example, we have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with much demonstration. That people should know my passion is in Torah and in tzedakah and in tefillah and so on. And even there's a lot left for the nistarim as well to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu discreetly. So when you look at somebody who's solely serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with discreetness, and again with all the great virtue to it, which this Hatzne Lechas Im Hashem Elikecha is a pasuk which speaks about this idea in a very virtuous tone, be discreet with your God. But mistarim tifke, that Yitzhak HaKadosh Baruch Hu is crying, that not in a way that is demonstrative to others. Within yourself, within your hiding, you cry in your expression of vulnerability to and with your Creator. It's profound, it's deep, it's real. It's authentic, it's genuine. And so to Kolaisik Batera Baseiser, again, there's a saying of our sages of blessed memory. Whoever occupies the Torah in a discreet way, great blessings come his way. So all these verses and sayings of our special memory, of our sages rather of blessed memory, that is, speak about this idea of serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu in a discreet manner, in a very virtuous tone. Because when we're talking about Avdei Hashem, those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu because their source of their neshama is smile, it's not like we think, oh, this is the right, this is the left, this is the good, this is the bad. No, the smile is the gvura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the gvura, which is the genuine godly attribute, midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is gvura. And if I have that in my neshama, this gvura, this discipline, midah associated with discipline, which I have in my neshama because I come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Rebbe begins the third chapter, which we quoted before, because I'm a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the 10 spheres, and so do I have the 10 spheres. So the gvura is a godly midah. It's a divine midah, thus a divine expression of my Avodas Hashem. So when the Rebbe speaks about this, certainly he's going to speak, I don't want to say more positive, but evidently becomes positive, especially we're talking about today. There's no question that the other way, the yamin, should be much more introduced and practiced because of the reasons we spoke about before. But when the Alter Rebbe speaks about yamin usmail, he says these are both Avdei Hashem, servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who constantly serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Their neshama is manifest, and because the neshama itself is made up of two spheres, chiefly two spheres, the chesed and gvura, the yamin and the smile. So the one who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a smile, yes, he's serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because his smile is associated with the gvura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is completely divine. And again, every midah of Atzilos is associated with the Ein Sof, the Bli Gvul, the infinite godly energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if I have that gvura, so it's the idea that it's expressed in a condensed manner, in a discreet manner, is of course a virtuous way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is it distinct of those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Chesed? Of course it is, because Chesed and Gvura are, even if you will, opposite midas. They're, in the end of the day, they're one, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Shayach B'Emunah, because it's talking about a godly midah, midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad, but they're two opposite expressions. So is it very distinct of the chesed of those Avdei Hashem which serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the side of Yamin? Yes, indeed. But is this a divine service? Of course it's a divine service. So all these psukim and all these memari chazal that the Rebbe brings, these verses and these sayings of our our sages of blessed memory, which the Rebbe brings over here, is of course each one of them is virtuous, serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu discreetly, having that cry out with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, discreetly, unique. You don't even have to explain. It's real. It's authentic. And beyond virtuous. Some are learning Torah b'seiser without the fanfare, because I know that Torah is chachmas v'yiratzeinu shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's no greater union than the union which exists between a Yid and HaKadosh Baruch Hu in comparison to learning Torah. Like the Alter Rebbe himself explains, always try to remember the 3 chapters in Likutei Amorim, other chapters as well. They have in the end of Memhei, which Alter Rebbe explains so beautifully the idea of Torah being kind of an intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but namely in Perek Hey, the 5th, the 27th, the 23rd, and the 37th in Likutei Amorim. That's the greatest union. Of course, we stop many times from our learning in order to do a mitzvah, because the master plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to take the physical and elevate it and sublimate it to a higher level to become part of the godly reality. That's why Neshama came down over here. It was taken away from the Misifta Shalmaila Yeshiva on high, and Dafka says, no, learn Torah and do mitzvahs over here. Deal with the physical, elevate, refine the physical, and make it part of the godly reality. That's why we're here. So, of course, a mitzvah which cannot be performed through with anybody through another party, you must stop learning Torah in order to fulfill the reason why your neshama came down to this world. but by measuring the connection, the unity of a neshama, the union of a neshama with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Torah vis-a-vis mitzvahs. Of course, Torah is the greatest union by far of a Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like he explained in these 3 chapters. So a Yid knows that I don't need the fanfare. I don't need people to even know I'm learning Torah. I know that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. He's in the Mishnah and he's in the Gemara. I take my Gemara, I come into the room, start learning, and learn diligently without removing any other distractions and thoughts, because I'm in unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm uniting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm in the most profound union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I come out a few hours later. I just had a connection, an unmatched and unparalleled connection with the Almighty, with the Ein Sof. I do it b'seiser. Could you think about something more virtuous than that? There's no ulterior motive over here. But nonetheless, we can appreciate why it's smile. It's discreet. It's more of a disciplined type of learning Torah. So these are the Eved Hashem, which comes and is associated with a smile. Now today is going to continue another few ideas, which is identified with Eved Hashem with the smile. The Eved Hashem, which is his source of the neshama, is more overwhelmed by the smile, by the gvura, that is. Again, we have all the spheres, but beyond, overwhelmed and overridden by the spirit of gvura. And then Al Teva goes on to those neshamas which serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on the yamin, on the chesed. Again, they also have all the other 10 spheres. But what is overwhelming, what is overriding, is the spirit of yamin. And as Al Teva is going to after presenting these 2 types of neshamas, Al Teva has this very beautiful message, and all coming back to that pasuk, Morav Tuvcha Shetzafantu L'Riyecho, how the great kindness that you imparted, but you hid among the people who fear you. We look forward, Be'ezus Hashem, to continue this beautiful chapter this coming week. Be'ezus Hashem, B'Shat Tov U'Mitzlachas. Have a wonderful night.